Hey y'all, I'm Leah.
And I'm Rachel.
We're two wives and a spark. As new parents and as an interracial couple, we're on a mission to connect with others and explore how race and politics influence so much for families like ours.
Yes, we believe intentional conversations are vehicles for change. So we're committed to learning in public and having real talk every step of the way.
And you know what? Maybe, just maybe one conversation at a time, we can make the world a better place.
I think so. So let's jump in, y'all.
Hey, y'all. Welcome to the last episode of season 3.
It is the final episode, my love. Yeah, we're at the end of a journey, but it's kind of a pause point. We're just putting a pin in the journey because we'll be back.
Yes.
Our dog is in the background. We're back in the closet, y'all. You know, it's a long story, but we are so happy to be here with you.
Yes, we're always happy to be here with you. No matter what, we'll get in the closet if we have to.
That's right. So as we get into this final episode of the season, we really wanted to offer you all some closing takeaways, some closing reflections, and some of what's been swirling around in our minds as we have had the joy and the privilege of just doing something different this season and talking to so many amazing folks, right?
Yeah, it's a true gift and honor to always be able to go back and listen to the voices of the folks we talk to. And, we follow them on Instagram and in the social media world. So it's always nice. It was nice before talking to them to see their families. But I don't know, there's like an extra special thing now. It's like, oh, we know them.
Yeah, and just to be, I mean, I'm sure most people can relate. Like you can know someone on social media or over email, but then you get to connect human to human and, just share stories. And it's just something different to have conversations. And that brings us back to why we started this podcast, which was all about sparking conversations and bringing more visibility to topics that are really important to us and the topics that we haven't been hearing or seeing enough of, right?
Yeah, especially as an interracial couple, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things we talked about a lot throughout this season, but also season 1, season 2, was just about both of our different identities coming into play as we date, as we now raise a child, as we're in relationship with each other and reaching out to other same-sex couples and their partnerships. So I think we want to do a little something that kind of brings both seasons back together with this season as we close out. If you all remember in season 1, we did a lot of unpacking words from our ancestors and quotes from our ancestors. So we're going to do some word sharing that way.
And just, not whether they're still living or have already passed, just bringing in wisdom from other folks. Yeah. So we would start every episode in season 1 with that. Season 1 was all about race too.
Yes. And then season 2 was all about the journey, right? To becoming mothers. And I think the essence of this conversation today is going to include the journey of right now, right? The political world that we're living in and how we're navigating it and what is ours to do, what is yours to do, what is ours collectively to do. So we're going to bring those two things kind of in. And as we leave this episode, we want to make sure the journey, the vehicle that you are using to be on this journey is still moving, even as these episodes are taking a little break.
Yeah, because we're going to take a pause this summer, but that doesn't mean the work stops.
Correct.
And it also doesn't mean we can't stay connected. And we're eager to hear and connect with you all about what you're up to and what you're working on and what this episode sparks for you, because it's in the in-between spaces that a lot of the work happens. And sometimes it's in the pause. I think that was season 2 that we talked about the pause, but it's like the importance of taking that pause is when you can actually let things simmer and marinate and like all the ingredients come together so you can really hear your thoughts and really think about what is mine to do in a different way. So that's always been important to us, to have a pause and to have some time to really think about, okay, what do we want to bring into next season? And what is true for us and what's important to bring in this journey? Because we're really wanting to be responsive to the moment that we're in, and that we wouldn't have, if we wouldn't have taken a pause, we wouldn't have layered in the lens of talking about politics this season, So that felt really helpful. It was crystallizing for us. All that to say, we are so happy to just be here and, as usual, thinking out loud. We don't have a lot prepared other than these quotes, and we're just going to have a conversation, and we invite you to just bring up a virtual chair with us and lean in and have it with us and share what it sparks for you.
Yeah. You want to share yours first or?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. Do you want to share the thing that, so there are two things that are true about this moment that we're in. So we're in the last day of Lesbian Visibility Week.
Yes,
We're
yes,
also right on the tail end of celebrating both of our birthdays.
yes, yes.
And so you
Yeah,
had this
yeah.
reflection of like one of our good friends called you on your birthday and said something that like super
It is still sitting in my
stood
spirit,
to
and
you.
I
Yeah.
just, yeah, I want to share it with you all. And I want to give props where props are due, right? We're going to be naming the folks of the quotes that we're sharing. So I also want to give a shout out to Tiffany, who shared
Tiffany Wright.
Tiffany Wright. That's true,
Yeah.
because I do know some multiple Tiffany's.
Lots of Tiffany's in the world.
The Tiffany, yeah,
The only one.
Tiffany Wright, who called me on my birthday, left me a video because I didn't answer, and she said, well, first, I want you to know that I love you because you deserve to be loved. And then she went on to share other things that she loves about me, which were also equally as beautiful. But the essence of like, I love you because you deserve to be loved has just been hugging me so tight all week. It's one of those moments where someone says something to you, you don't realize you need to hear, you
Mm-hmm.
hear it, and then it just changes your world.
Yeah.
It is like, I have never thought about the fact that in this way, like someone could love me, not because of what I bring to the table, not because of, like my characteristics or because of my good looks, but just because I deserve that because I'm a human being, right? I am a living soul on this planet. And I think the reason why it's like really capturing my heart is because I feel deeply about that. I feel that when I think about you, I feel that when I think about our child, like,
Mm-hmm.
but the essence of it, I think, is also has to be or needs to somehow get rooted into this political world we're in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we need to be loving each other simply just to love each other, right?
Mm.
Instead of it being, well, can I love you if you're this different from me? Or,
Mm.
can I, share my love for you as a human being if you identify in these ways? Like
Mm.
it's become so much of people navigating how they can share love when love is this natural gift we've all been given,
Mm.
right? And some people it's been stripped away at very young ages for a variety of reasons,
Mm-hmm.
but we all have the power to love people just because,
Yeah.
right? Just because that's what we each deserve. Yeah, I mean, I'm probably going to be sitting with that and reflecting on that, especially now that I'm out of grad school, whoop, whoop, until August. But yeah, it really, really hit my heart.
It's so interesting, this idea of the word choice, right? Deserve
Mm-hmm.
versus like worthy of,
Mm-hmm.
or like there are all these different words that could be used. And I think this moment that we're in this political landscape, like deserve, I just, so many thoughts are swirling around in my mind, but I think there people have decided who deserves
Yes.
a lot of things, right? Like we're taught, and we're in a moment where men are deciding what women deserve to do with their bodies and like what women should do, so there are like all these different word choices. And I'm thinking about how layered that word is.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm thinking about like the only thing that I can go back down to is that every child, every newborn
Mm-hmm.
deserves, like, so in all of us, we have that newborn and that baby, that
Mm-hmm.
child that was like once either tended to, attached to, like
Mm-hmm.
all these needs that, as we've been learning on our journey of parenthood with Ember, like there are just moments where you watch how things can unravel in different ways
Mm-hmm.
based on the parent's response to the kid. Right. And so I just have this moment of, I think everybody's craving love. I think everybody at their core wants love
Mm-hmm.
and doesn't want to feel alone and isolated. But at the end of the day, what breaks my heart is that people are making judgment calls and value calls and like ranking people on all sorts of systemic, both systemic ways, but also individual ways
Mm-hmm.
of yeah, just deciding like, nope, you don't deserve that. You don't deserve to even see books about families like yours in
Yeah.
school. You don't
Yeah.
deserve, like,
Yeah.
this idea of deserving is so interesting because people with positions of power are using that power to make decisions about the very essence of what
What
you're
people
talking
deserve.
about, which
Yeah.
is like, yeah, it's just really deep for me.
Yeah. No, I actually like the way you flip that. I think it is a super powerful word, right? Because at the end of the day, what we all deserve, no one else should have the power to dictate that.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And we've created a structure and a system in this country where the way in which we give people power is also this, we also give them the power to decide what we as, Americans deserve.
Mm.
Right? From Medicare, you can think about any structure or system.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point around like every baby is born into this world, just wanting love, wanting
Yeah.
attachment.
Yeah.
And somehow within our structures and systems, that gets the core of who we are and what's inside of us gets stripped away from us.
And basic needs, like because deserve versus need versus worthy, like all these things, like every baby does deserve to have a warm,
The basic needs.
just basic need,
Yeah. And so then when you become aware enough that your basic needs are not being met,
yeah,
you either, depends on what your brain does, but you either fight for them to be met,
right,
or it helps your spirit determine like, oh, well, maybe I'm not deserving of that, right? Or
And
if I'm not receiving that, then I'm not supposed to, right? And then you
yeah,
start going through those as you get older and you start understanding the world around you, like, oh, maybe I don't deserve love. I don't love myself enough. Like,
right,
and so I think we're all chasing that, right? Like
right,
we're
like,
all chasing a desire back to our core.
yeah, and as soon as I said all babies, like every human deserves to have basic needs met.
Yeah.
Like, how do we get to this place where people have decided, no, you actually don't deserve basic
Right. When does that
needs?
switch flip?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you were a baby and you were very deserving and you deserve life. You deserve all these things, right? As
Mm-hmm.
people will argue.
Mm-hmm.
And then at what age
Mm-hmm.
does that deserving stop existing?
Yeah. I mean, it's super interesting because it makes me think of a lot of moms that I follow on social media. There was this kind of, I don't know if it was a trend or just it just happened to be that a lot of women were sharing stories of like before baby and after baby. So
Mm-hmm.
like pregnancy care versus postpartum care and the big gap. Like when you're pregnant, okay, here's all this stuff that you're going to get and receive and have access to. And then your baby's here. Oh, good luck. Like here's 2 weeks. Here's a medical bill and here's this, that, and the other. And here's like all these, isolating experiences without a lot of care in the US. So this is a very US centric conversation. But all that to say, I just I don't mean to go all the way down a rabbit hole, but that conversation, that video from Tiff really did spark a big conversation for us about like, oh man, is that kind of at the heart of this season? Like we are really truly grappling with how did we get here? This idea of hurt people has come up so much in so many episodes, and this idea that we have our sphere of influence, we have our communities that we can impact,
right?
And this is such a bigger conversation, but at the end of the day, we hope that we spark a conversation and some action around being more forces of love in the world, and being that voice that says, yeah, you are worthy, you do deserve X, Y, and Z, right? You do deserve love.
Yeah. And I think if we could all go into our positions of power, our positions, period, with that rooted in us, that everyone is deserving, period. I don't get to decide if you deserve to have your basic needs met. And I think we have to figure out a way to get out of that cycle of like me deciding as a person in power if you deserve something.
Well, I mean,
I know that's institutional and structural and by design, but that's the fight, right? Like we got to get out of that structure.
I'm having this kind of visceral reaction. So then my brain goes to like, okay, right. Every single person does deserve love. And at the same time, I'm having this image. I don't know if you saw the other day, it might have been yesterday or the day before that, this really intense and extreme video that was shared about a rally that took place in Ohio of people like openly marching with swastika flags and praising Nazism and protesting trans community or the drag community. There was like, what I remember is this, there was either a drag show or I can't remember what they were protesting, but it was a a group of organized men with these masks on and these red shirts, and it was very disturbing to watch this
Yeah.
video be shared with all the hatred that was being spewed. And it was just so much hatred. And I only watched it for a split second, and I had to keep scrolling because it made my whole blood boil. But I am thinking of those humans who were wearing, face coverings, and not most 90% of them weren't showing their identities.
Right.
And inside of each of them is like a very hurt child, is what I'm trying to hear. But when you said everyone deserves to be loved, I had a reaction around like, how did they get there? That level of hatred, and that, they're just talking about blood on hand. Like, it was just very disturbing. One of the most disturbing things I've seen in a very long time.
I think this point, though, that you're making is what happens when love is not given to each of us, right?
Yeah.
I think because it is naturally in our core to be attached, to be loved, to be in community as human beings, I actually genuinely do believe that we all want attachment. We all want connection.
Of course.
And I think because of the structures and institutions that we live in that are dividing that are pushing that actual thing that is within each of us out of us, I think the ways in which people are showing up from that core part of them being like, torn apart is in these like crazy, hateful ways, because you're like yearning
For connection.
So you're doing these things that's like, okay, well, this is the connection I'm going to get. I'm in community with these people who also are spewing hate, and maybe that's helping me feel
A sense of belonging.
this void. But really, it's not, because why am I covering myself up to do it?
Exactly.
Right?
That's the piece.
But we are not stopping, especially with the social media blast of like, now everything is captured, right? So now I feel like I have to stay in fight mode, because now you captured me doing that, and now you're going to hate on what I was doing, and I'm trying to have connection with this community, and all these, it's very warped, right? We've lost. And I think Mother Nature in a lot of ways is really trying to teach us this, like, y'all are missing the mark. Like, get back to your roots, get grounded, pause, be back in yourselves, and remember that everyone deserves. This is why I think I keep coming back to it, is like, my answer to you would be like, yeah, that group of people still deserves love. And as I know that might be hard to hear, but like, I don't gain anything in my spirit by hating on your hate. Right? Like, does your hate make me sad? Yes.
Yeah.
And does your hate break a part of my spirit? Yes. And
am I going to give you that power?
It's not even about the power. I think it's also just about seeing your humanness and understanding, like, oh man, like you've really lost love.
But the hatred, I mean, I hear you, but I feel, I don't know. I feel like that level of hatred and those types of threats to kill somebody, I don't know. That's where it comes from, deserving versus worthy versus like language matters, because
then that's when you
deserve
get into this
means you
dynamic.
earn.
I
don't
hear
know.
that, but you then get into this dynamic of, let me choose then who gets this natural thing that.
Or is it? I don't know. I don't know. I really struggle that whole scene. That's why I don't even know the details of what happened. I should be better and know my facts of what the situation was, but I just know it was so disturbing that I like threw my phone down because I couldn't even learn about what was happening. It was just like, how did we get there? And how do people feel so emboldened to put a banner together, flags? I mean, the display was so hateful. And I don't know, when we talk about deserve, anyway.
I mean, I might argue that like your yearning to see this group of people do better is love. Your desire to say like, how dare you?
How could you?
How could you?
So that's love.
Love is holding people accountable to be better. Is saying, this is unacceptable. You can be better than this.
Yes.
Right? Because the other choice is to say, screw these people there. How dare you, and ignore, right? To be like, I can't even, right. but your desire to
Mm,
be disappointed,
mm,
to
mm,
wonder like, how did you let yourself get to this? Even wonder
mm.
about how did you let yourself take the steps
And to feel
and
sad
to
for
yeah,
them.
and to feel
Yeah.
sad with, right? Because
Yeah.
I would argue that they are sad.
Yeah. But that anger and that rage
Is
is,
showing up in this way
yeah.
that unfortunately is life threatening.
That's our community, like those are
Right.
brothers
Right.
and sisters and
Right.
cousins and nieces and nephews and
Right.
people we love and care
Yeah.
about. So there's a part of me that feels very
Because you love the other
the
side.
same amount of rage that they feel in their hearts. How
Yeah.
it's deep, but
Yeah.
I think I appreciate your reframe because I hadn't thought about what love looks like in action.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can hear that. I can hear that okay, everybody deserves, so love in this essence, in the way that you just described it, everybody deserves to have people who care about them hold them accountable for their actions.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Because I am you and you are me, right? I am
Mm,
human and so are you.
mm,
Your pain is my pain. Your hurt is my hurt.
mm-hmm.
And if I let your action, the actions that you're showing up with that are very hurtful,
Mm-hmm.
then turn me into a person that goes to hurt you because you're hurting me,
Right, right, right.
we just end up in this world with more hurt
And more
and
division.
more division, right? And unfortunately, we are seeing that, right?
Yeah,
Like now we are living in this political moment.
yeah.
And we, you and I talked about this as we were reflecting for this show, that like history constantly repeats itself, right?
Yes.
And so
Mm-hmm.
like we are living in this political moment of seeing how detrimental hate can be.
Yeah.
And in the 60s, right, before the Civil Rights Act was passed, I would
Mm-hmm.
argue that those activists also were living in a time where they could see how damaging hatred could be.
Right. And it just wasn't on display in social
It was
media.
on display differently, right? It was on
Yeah.
TV,
Yeah.
but it was a different,
Not everybody
the
had
brand
their
was different,
phones in their
right?
hands.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we are watching the same playbook at play with
Yeah.
more tools.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we've got to use the strongest tool we have,
Mm-hmm.
which is love.
But what if people aren't open to receiving it?
That's a great question, right? Because are we just giving something to someone for their response?
Truly. Like, I think some people have gone too far down a path of hatred to where there's no openness. And the only response is to add more ammunition to the weapon
Mm-hmm.
and to deflect and project and to not face the truth.
Yeah, I hear that. And I think there's privilege in what I'm about to say in terms of like, I think the heavens, the spiritual world, all the beings, that I don't have to sit in that type of hate,
Mm-hmm.
that type of hate does not live within me.
Mm-hmm.
It could, right? I'm a Black lesbian woman
Mm-hmm.
in Texas,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like the amount of discrimination within those identities
Mm-hmm.
could fuel me enough to be so angry
Mm-hmm.
at a particular demographic,
Mm-hmm.
if I really want to stereotype, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And to walk around with that anger
Mm-hmm.
because my rights are being stripped away, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And every day I have to make a choice
Mm-hmm.
around if I want to do that or not,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like I do think, again, like this is privileged, but to say, because it's like I make a choice
Mm-hmm.
knowing that my life depends, like this is life or death. We are fighting people over our lives our rights to exist,
Yeah.
right? And
Who
that is
deserves to live.
right.
Yeah.
And so in that fight, I'm gonna choose to go in with my weaponry being the love that I have.
Mm.
It doesn't mean I'm not angry. It doesn't mean I'm not disappointed. Like all those things still exist,
Mm-hmm.
but the way in which it shows up in me
Mm.
is I still do have hope, and not naivety, like, but I do have hope that we as a human race can be better than this.
Mm. Yeah. And that's a choice. It's also
Yeah.
like, thanks to a lot of things. I wonder a lot about, you said multiple times like privilege. I think about the privilege to choose, the privilege to have had therapy, the privilege to have
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
healing, space for healing, the privilege to have
Time.
had time and energy to do the inner work. And
I mean, I'll
I
tell
don't
you,
know.
right? We were out yesterday and a woman walked up to us to invite us to a same-sex parent group.
Mm-hmm.
That action
Mm-hmm.
can fill my cup to stay in the arena.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Those little micro
It's
moments.
micro, yes.
Yeah.
It's because that to me gives me hope to
Mm-hmm.
believe more of us are out here fighting in the ways in which we have the space, the resources,
Yeah.
the time to, right?
Yeah.
But if I only gave myself, this is like with people who only watch Fox News or only
Yeah.
watch CNN, if I
Yeah.
only give myself one avenue to look at,
Yeah.
then I'm going to eventually train my brain to believe I can only go down this one road,
Yeah.
right?
And if you only choose, if you spend too much time on social media, it can really
Any
warp your
media.
brain, any kind of media. Yeah.
If I
Because
only
you
spend
can,
time with
and you're
you,
not in person with other people and out in the community and
yeah,
like face to face hearing. Yeah.
we can train our brains to do
Yeah.
dynamic things. I mean, you know
Mm-hmm.
this, you're a dynamic woman. Like you've trained yourself to be really disciplined, to
Mm,
understand the world in such a nuanced,
mm,
incredible way, but you have trained your brain to be able to take something complex
mm,
and figure out how it works. That's a
mm,
skill,
mm.
right? And I think we got to give ourselves more credit in believing that the power tool we have, this is going to sound like the Beatles or whatever, but the power tool we have is love,
Mm.
and that everyone deserves it. And I actually like that we don't necessarily agree. We're not coming to the same center point.
Yeah, we're just coming at it from different
Yeah.
angles. I'm happen to be coming at it from like a fresh experience of a real kind of ethical dilemma I had last night of like, oh, do I go back and like find out what happened? Oh, I can't. I won't sleep at night if I learn, because it was like just the end of the day, and I just like, you
Yeah.
can't control what comes on your social media feed either. Like I went from looking at a recipe to flowers to that. Like I was like,
Yeah.
whoa, I don't know, I wasn't ready. And
I
I've
love
been,
your realness with
yeah.
it, and I love that you're questioning out loud
Mhm.
if deserve
Is that the
is
word?
that the word, right? I love that you're grappling with that out loud. And I guess I would turn it back to our audience too, to share with us what you're grappling with from this conversation. I love that this is an unfinished
Yeah.
and wrapped up
Yeah.
thought, because I think that is the essence of this work,
Yeah.
right? And
And maybe it's more of a provocation, like a question that we're leaving with, like, is that, yeah, I think like what who is deserving the word. How do we move forward? Everyone's definition of love is so different, but I do really, really, really love and appreciate your definition and your reframe of what love looks like, because that's helping me.
because I believe love is a power tool, I can be pushed on that, right?
Yeah.
And still love the push.
Yeah, so we're eager to hear from y'all. What do you think? Do you align with,
This
yeah,
conversation,
this
where do you
conversation? Like,
sit with
yeah,
it? Yeah.
how is it landing for you? And what are you thinking of when you think of this idea of, does everyone deserve to be loved? Does everyone, like, what is our power in this kind of conversation about unconditional love and showing up for people? I always think of the Cornell West quote, love justice is what love looks like in public.
Hmm.
And that's been swirling around in my mind as you've been talking. Like, if we really bring it home,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of where I was like, yeah, the accountability is love. Like
Mm-hmm.
it can be, but the piece that I'm struggling with is, if people are not open to receiving that, where do we go from there? So that'll be one question that we're going to offer for y'all to think about with us. Let's share some other quotes that we're, just kind of grappling with and thinking about as we close out this season, because we wanted to also bring some other voices into the room and hear what these quotes spark for y'all too.
All right. You want me to go first?
Go for it.
So I turn to Audre Lorde a lot. I think since our friend Ariel gave me a magnet with one of her quotes on it, I've gone into more of her works
Mm-hmm.
and or their works. And one of the things I just think they're before their time.
Mm-hmm.
We like it's beautiful to be able to have the words now because I think we need them a lot in our
Mm-hmm.
society.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they say is what we must do is commit ourselves to some future that can include each other and to work toward that future with the particular strengths of our individual identities. And in order for us to do this, we must allow each other our differences at the same time as we recognize our sameness.
Mm.
And I think what I love the most about this is it's a both and, right?
Mm-hmm.
We must both allow our differences to live
Mm-hmm.
and be
Mm-hmm.
and develop and grow
Mm-hmm.
and take up space
Mm-hmm.
while also loving that about ourselves and seeing that we have things in common,
Mm-hmm.
right? When we first started playing Spark with communities, I tell this story in small groups, but I'll tell it. Maybe I've said it on this podcast, but like,
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest, I had a lot more sameness that shocked me, at least in terms of stories with white men. And I was like, huh, I would have never guessed we had that in common. Just wouldn't have let it be even a thought that formed that we would have thought about that the same way or had a story that was so similar, and like
Mm-hmm.
when we argue over our differences and never see them as gifts of opportunity to then see our sameness, we
Mm-hmm.
all lose.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, we get further from each other. And what
Mm-hmm.
fills that space, which we're seeing right now, is hate.
Mm-hmm.
Because we get further from each other and then more unknown grows and more unknown grows. And so something has to fill that space. And unfortunately, what's filling it is the hatred that is being caused because of all the unknowns, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I just want us to keep committing to each other to work
Mm-hmm.
towards this future that allows our differences to live and breathe free and accept it while we also find commonalities in our sameness.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful quote. And to me, it brings home this idea that, for decades, Audre Lorde was fighting for a future that didn't get to be seen,
Right.
and I think that, to me, this idea of like commit ourselves to some future. We
Mm-hmm.
don't know that future. We're not going to get to see
In
the
our
future
lifetime,
in
for sure.
our lifetime. I pray and hope that Ember gets to see the future we're fighting for,
Right.
some glimmer of it,
Yeah.
but in our lifetime, it's very possible that we're not going to get to see the future that we hope and pray that she has, right?
Yeah.
And so it makes me think about how steadfast and how dedicated, and this word commit, like we you can't, if you think that you will have access to this future and you're waiting for that instant gratification, that's not the fight.
Right.
Like,
Right.
to your point earlier, the civil rights movement and all the folks that were fighting on the front lines 50 years ago most likely knew in the moment things needed to get better and justice needed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But the exact vision, like, we don't even know what it looks like because none of us have a schema for it.
Right.
Really,
Right.
truly. We know what injustice looks like and feels like. We know what oppression looks like and feels like. We have no evidence of what it actually looks like in our country.
Yeah.
I think maybe one could argue there might be some other countries that are working toward it and making a little bit more progress.
But they don't
But
have our demographics.
yeah, and that's the piece, is like, so this is lifelong work, and I think it's just an important reminder to be like, right, if we feel discouraged, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And if we feel tired, that makes sense. But this idea that, like, the commitment and the dedication that's required to this journey toward a better future of inclusion, that, to me, it makes you stay disciplined, right? Because you can't just, we said in season 1, we say it all the time, like, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Like, this is work that's just doesn't have a a nicely clean cut bow wrapped up at the end. It's just like, no, this is, it's messy. And it's, what we have to remember is this what could be called a fight. Like this year since we started Spark, it's been something brewing in our hearts that like the conversation has to change. Like we need more visibility, we need more action, we need more accountability. Let's spark the conversation. Like you could argue that that's, for some people, 2020, a different spark ignited in their hearts and their spirits and their organization and their, and so this, it might be a decade before we start to see any inklings of progress, because people on both sides of this fight are having big reactions to the idea of change coming. But it's a lot. It's a lot. And it makes me think of the quote that I chose, actually, that's quite connected, from Alok, who says, we love Alok's work. They are so brilliant. And they say, we have been taught to fear the very things that have the potential to set us free. And that quote to me speaks to your point earlier about, you know, maybe love is the thing that will set us free. And Alok talks so much about the power of love and loving people with so much hate in their hearts. And they do it with so much power and just beauty, you know, and grace and compassion. And it's just remarkable to get to have the gift of witnessing Alok's presence in the world, right? But this quote really spoke to me because it does bring me back to like somewhere inside of us as a little kid who wasn't taught, who was taught something, right? Who wasn't taught to love, or was taught to fear, was taught to not include, was taught, don't read those books. That family's not a real family, you know, like, and that kind of, this quote to me brings home season 3 in a lot of ways, because it's like at the heart of what so many of our conversations have been.
Yeah, I think the key word in that is taught, right? And I think there's layers to teaching, right? You can teach visibly, right? With whichever books you choose, which words you choose, which actions you choose, with who you choose to be around. You get taught a lot. And you can choose invisibly, right? So what's not around you? What don't you see? That teaches you something, right? What and I think it's important for us to recognize that that's the political moment we are in, right? Is that there are things being pushed for visibility and things being pulled to become invisible, because there's teaching in that.
Yes.
Right. And the teaching of that could also be, how come I'm not seeing blank? Or does this exist? There's literally a lesson. There's learning in that, right?
Yeah.
And to go back to what we started at the top of this is Lesbian Visibility Week. And you and I talked about like, had we had seen more lesbians growing up, how would that have impacted us? Will we still be where we are now? Would our whole journeys be different? And I would, we can always hypothesize those types of things, but I think not seeing lesbians growing up to a high degree taught us that something was missing. Right? Like, is this the only way you could be in a relationship? Can it only be men and women? Can it be, what if that doesn't sit in my spirit, right? Like, what if me being with a man is not what makes me feel alive, right? Like, it then taught us to listen to ourselves. So there's something to be taught in all of it. And I guess that, to me, as we watch and act in the world that we're currently in, just remembering that is teaching us all something.
Yeah. So the invisible, the visible, the explicit, the implicit, all these messages that actually, because kids are smart, right? And young adults are smart. And so what you're seeing with Gen Z, and what you're seeing with young people speaking up and saying like, no, actually, I'm going to walk out, is like, you can try to censor, but in fact, there are always, since the beginning of time, like, people have, when they have access to understand their needs, and when there's an opportunity for people to say, I know better, so I'm going to do better.
Mhm.
Or like, no, I see things differently. Like when
Mhm.
when I have the opportunity to have that, I mean, yeah, I think young people are going to continue to inspire and amaze us in these coming years. Like we're just seeing the impact of the beginning glimmer. Like we're most of these policies have not even become law, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And this is already how much people are pushing back. And so
Mhm.
I'm just reminded of the power of organizing, the power of coming together, and the power of being reminded that you're not alone.
Yeah.
And there are any time in the history, you know, when you look back at history, when communities have been oppressed, when education has involved censorship and you know, taking away of resources, since the beginning of time, people have always found a way,
Yeah.
you know, and this idea that Alok offers, the potential to set us free. Like we are all craving liberation deep
Mhm.
down. We're all craving belonging deep down. We're
Mhm.
all craving freedom.
Mhm.
And that is so deep to me that like, okay, fine. You know, so these policies, some are, you know, being signed into law, some are not. Communities are fighting back. Communities are rising up and pushing back and protesting and going to capitals and standing outside their lawmakers' door. Like that, this is the moment, you know, that this is just the beginning of a long journey of us understanding like what happened. So this generation has visibility to the explicit tension in a
Mhm.
way that when we were kids, we did not have visibility.
Mhm.
It was under
Mhm.
it was there, but it was under the hood of the car and
Mhm.
everything was kind of polite and like, we just don't talk about this. You
Mhm.
know, in school, it was like, we're colorblind, we don't
Mhm.
see this. And you know, marriage is between a man. Like
Mhm.
there were these messages that you just, there was no conflict.
Yeah.
And so, or at least in my experience.
Yeah.
And so we don't know the ripple effect of this generation having access to this type of
Right.
explicit conflict
Exactly.
yet, which I think is
Exactly.
fascinating.
Yeah.
We don't have a schema for it yet.
Exactly. And I think our generation has to continue to learn from the next generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
While also lifting the works that came before,
Right.
right? And carrying it into
Yeah.
the background, the knowledge, right? Understand, because you can have the next generation has this wave of energy going,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think it's our job to bring in the context.
Yeah.
So as that wave goes, they understand where that energy needs to go, what it needs to go toward.
Yeah.
Um, I think they'll do it, to be
I do
honest.
too.
Like I
There's
do.
a little meme that was going around a couple weeks ago that was like, it had a picture of Gen Z protesting, and then there was this caricature of like Gen X and millennial parents with these speakers being like, here you go, kids. Like they had these life-size speakers, like, come on, we're here for you. We
Yeah.
see you.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think if any generation is gonna make space for change, I think it's time to know when it's time for us to get out the way a little bit, you know, and to like make space and to share space and to provide the context when it's asked for and when, you know,
Right.
but I think there is this, we're in this really powerful moment that I just want to remember when it gets hard,
Yeah.
right? Because it is going to be hard and there is a long fight ahead of us and there is a lot of work to do. But I think remembering that we're not alone, remembering that the next generation sees the water we're swimming
Yeah.
in a very particular and profound way.
Yeah.
They have a fluency and a literacy in a conversation that we've learned in our 30s, you
Yeah.
know? So
Yeah.
it's pretty powerful.
It's starting earlier for
Yeah.
them. So
Yeah.
that's more time
Yeah.
to push,
And
right?
then
And
you think, yeah,
to be taught,
right. And to teach others
and to
and to,
teach others.
yeah.
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 I think it's a dynamic wave to be in,
Mm-hmm.
to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we are all in it, whether we know it or not.
Yeah.
We are all in it. So
Yeah. To our community, to our beloved listeners, what does this make you think and feel and what are you holding on to? What's keeping you in it? You know,
mhm.
what's your spark of motivation, inspiration, determination? What is it for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let us know. We want to hear those answers.
Mm-hmm.
As we take a break, we'll be processing what season 4 will be about. And
Mm-hmm.
whenever we hear from people, that helps spark what the
Mm-hmm.
next season will be about. So please do share,
Yeah.
and let us know what stood out to you in this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
What comes up for you. As always, we love getting those audible messages from folks or emails from folks, phone calls from folks too.
Yeah, Audible. I was like,
I know,
Audible.
I was like,
Audible book?
you know,
You mean
the
audio?
audio, you know what I'm saying?
Voice message.
Hey, you understood it.
I did.
Okay. Anyway,
I
y'all, we
love
love y'all.
you.
We appreciate y'all. Thank you so much for listening to this season.
Yeah.
Share it,
Yeah.
get it out to people. Let stories be heard that maybe folks aren't aware of, and come back and join us next season.
Yes, and we really do mean it when we say, like, please hit us up and let us know what you want to see more of, less of next season. You know, it sounds like a resounding yes, we want to keep interviews going, and like they're all different requests that we've had of different types of interviews, like interviewing more folks in the LGBTQIA plus community, interviewing allies, interviewing folks in the legal system. Like there's just so many ideas that folks have offered, so we would love to hear from you. And thank you for letting us learn out loud today. This was a synthesizing conversation, but we really had no idea where it was going to go. So
that's the best one.
Yeah,
that's
thank
the best
you.
one.
And thank you, my love, for your just you helped me today see love in a different way, and I'm still sitting with our conversation. So I appreciate you.
I appreciate you, and I actually love when there is room for us to have some difference in our thinking and to engage. That's, I think, how we fell in love. It's like the power of being in the same space but coming at it from different angles. I think that is the essence of our relationship.
That's so true. So true.
So we'll continue to share with y'all and continue to show up for this community. We love you all. And until next season,
yes,
we are sending love
and light. Thanks for joining us today, y'all. We'd love to stay connected on Instagram and Facebook, so you can find us at 2 Wives and a Spark, all spelled out.
If you enjoyed today's episode, share it with a friend so we can keep the sparks of connection going. If you want access to our episodes as soon as they drop, click that subscribe button. Every rating and review helps others find us, so thank you in advance for letting us know what you think. I'm Leah.
And I'm Rachel.
Thank you for listening to 2 Wives and a Spark.